Hi, this is Richard Vague with Tychos. Today we're going to respond to a question from one of our Australian subscribers and give a brief overview and update on that country. Given how central the subject of rising inequality is in most countries, let's start there. Inequality in Australia has been rising, as in all developed economies. According to the Australian National Account's distribution of household income, consumption, and wealth, in 2004, the net worth of the top 20% was 1.1 times that of the bottom 60%. But by 2022, that had increased by 19% to 1.3 times. But that is not nearly as large a difference as in the U.S., where the difference was 3.4 times in 2004 and 5 times in 2022, a whopping 47% increase. That's because there is less disparity in the ownership of stocks and real estate, which make up 83% of all Australian household assets. In Australia, the bottom 60% own 36% of these assets, whereas in the U.S. it is only 16%, according to the Fed's distributional financial accounts. And the top 20% owns 43% of these assets, whereas in the U.S. it is 70%. A second key thing to note is that Australia has recently attained a large net export surplus, which has improved Australia's private debt ratios along with its public debt ratios. A positive net export balance brings GDP growth without corresponding increase in domestic private debt, thus improving the ratio. The private debt ratio has gone from a peak of 201% in 2016 down to 174% in 2022. It has been a saving grace for its economy. This has been particularly helpful for mortgage debt, which had grown problematically high, reaching a peak of 96% in 2017, but which has now declined slightly to 88%. With this, Australia's home price index, after skyrocketing since 2000 with the flood of mortgage debt, has finally softened a bit from a peak of 185 to 169, though this relief may not hold given the generally low levels of property listings in Australia. The favorable burst in net exports that has been so helpful to these ratios is largely related to COVID and Ukraine war shortages and disruptions that sharply boosted the prices of Australia's primary exports, including iron ore, petroleum gas, coal, and wheat. Iron ore, as but one example, was $88 per metric ton just before COVID, reached $215 in 2021, and is now back down to $109. Australia may continue to benefit here, but probably not at the extraordinary levels of 2021 and 2022. Moving along in our analysis, here is a look at the net income of key Australian macro sectors through time. The net income of Australia's households has improved markedly since the troubling net loss position before the global financial crisis to a positive net income position since that time. This has been the result of two things: the benefit to households of Australian government's net deficit spending and the turnaround of its economy from a net importer to a net exporter, reflected in this chart by the total domestic or current account position. The government has gone from a budget surplus of just under 2% in 2016 to a deficit generally in the 2 to 4% of GDP range since then. The benefit of that goes to household accounts. And the current account balance has gone from a 6% deficit in the 2000s to a surplus of over 2% in 2021 and 2022. This has contributed to the continued climb in household net worth, which is now 643% of GDP as compared to 352% in 1995, with a dip, of course, in the global financial crisis. Though, as noted previously, the benefit of this climb has gone disproportionately to the wealthiest. Australia's high household net worth compares favorably to other major developed economies as shown here. One other very notable thing is the positive net worth of 110% of GDP of Australia's government, even taking into account its debt, due to its substantial holdings of, quote, minerals and energy reserves, end quote. As shown here, this contrasts to the negative net worth of 42% of the U.S. government and trails only China, which achieved its high net worth through ownership of state-owned enterprises, likely at unrealistically high valuations, so may not actually hold up under scrutiny, but that's another analysis for another day. So with real GDP growth of 2.8% in 2022 and 2.3% annual growth as of June of 2023, Australia's economy overall is in reasonable shape, due in good measure to its export balance, but it is an open question as to whether that benefit will persist. That's it for this week. Thanks.